You're traveling to another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of ideas. You unlock this door with the key of imagination. A journey into a wondrous digital landscape, whose boundaries are that of imagination, whose boundaries are that of consciousness itself, whose boundaries are that of consciousness itself,
You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance.
of things and ideas.
You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance.
It is the middle ground between science and non-duality.
A dimension of
It lies between the pit of man's dreams and the summit of his knowledge. This is the dimension of imagination.
A dimension of sound.
It is an area which we call the infinite Imaginarium. Whoever controls the media, the images, controls the culture. The primary function of media is not to convey information, but to coordinate behavior. The mass media coordinates behavior of a global magnitude. When behavior is learned, it becomes habitual and subconscious. The mass media today functions as the instrument of indoctrination. Media can be used as a tool to liberate rather than to dominate the mass mind, to rapidly alter our species' behavior patterns, install new habits that enhance resilience, community building, and sustainability. This is media, not just for entertainment, corporations, or monetization,
Moving into a dimension
but rather
of mind.
media for inspiration, transformation,
Moving into a dimension of mind.
and manifestation.
You're moving into a dimension of
Whoever controls the media, the images,
Moving into
controls
a
the
dimension
culture.
of mind.
Allen Ginsberg. So today, our show is on the media. And issue at root for the Infinite Imaginarium is also kind of our response and hopefully our solution to this whole concept and issue. So real quick, we have Kevin here, who's also known on Minds by KDJH. We got Nikki, also known as Cartman1 on Minds. And we got Misty Nomer from Minds as well. A pretty intense show, so I'm going to get into what is media. Media is a plural of medium, means of communication, such as, radio, television, newspaper, the internet, all that stuff. The medium is a mean in which to communicate or express an idea or material form used by the artist. The primary function of media is not, right now in today's society, is not to convey information really, but to coordinate behavior. The mass media coordinates behavior in a global magnitude. When behavior is learned, it becomes habitual and subconscious. Not even aware of the behavior. Underlining subconscious and programming that's there. Mass media today functions as an instrument of indoctrination, but media could also be used as a tool of liberation. And this is what we're trying to do with Infinite Imaginarium. And I kind of want to think it out loud with everybody. And it's going to be like, with everything in the Infinite Imaginarium, tapping into the collaborative, creative intelligence. And this is what the Imaginarium is about. In one of my poems, I said, I want to create art not just for entertainment, not just for corporations or monetization, but for inspiration, transformation, and manifestation. And that right there encompasses my intention of how to use Infinite Imaginarium. Now in social media, we're like embedded so much in media. We carry around phones with us all the time, ads and YouTube videos, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, Minds, whatever it is. I want to use that tool to liberate myself first, liberate my network of people, my friends, the Imaginarium crew, and then outward spread that throughout these ripples in consciousness. I think almost everybody's have heard The Medium is the Message by Marshall McLuhan. He talks about the stuff that we're unaware of. So it's not just what the newscast says in his report or what a movie does, but how it triggers a behavioral response of how we changes our perception of how we emotionally get triggered by something. And a lot of times the underlying thing to almost everything in our culture or the dominant culture is to trigger us to consume. And this is something that, some of us are aware of, some of us are not aware of. But can we trigger a response for action, for liberation, for expressing your true self, or even helping to spark your journey to the nature of your being, the nature of reality? And I think in a lot of ways, the answer comes with art. This is kind of what we play with Infinite Imaginarium. There's a lot of, let's say, information media too that we like consume and we like to share, but ultimately, I think, is to transform it into art. I also like this line that I kind of fixed something that John F. Kennedy said one time. If more poets knew politics and more politicians knew poetry, I'm convinced the world would be a lot better place. And I changed it to, if more scientists knew poetry and more poets knew science, I'm convinced the world would be a lot better place. And it's this thing of being non-dualistic, kind of having some balance or dance between these two seemingly different mindsets, but really they're different sides of the same coin. What we try to branch it out to is the collaboration in between. So now I want to get to kind of the collaboration part and open it up to Nikki or to anybody else about their thoughts and feelings, media in general, and more specifically, the digital media.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say because, I think about Facebook, for example, as a, social media platform of the modern day. And obviously you've got before that, and as well as now, television or television, as we like to say nowadays. And what tends to happen is these platforms put people into a alpha brainwave state. And the alpha brainwave state is a passive, suggestible state where people become so susceptible to absorbing information into their subconscious minds, which then obviously affects their day-to-day living. And it's like, like on Facebook, you get these sort of little question and answer quizzes. It could be something like, what era did you live in a past life? Or, what's your totem animal? Or what type of personality are you? Or, it can be anything like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be cosmic or spiritual. It could be just some weird little thing. And people think, oh, isn't this fun? And obviously that kind of serves a purpose for the attention economy, in that massive amounts of information is collected, the masses, if you like, about what they like to do, what they like to scroll and look at the most, and then obviously more of that is then pushed into in our direction, and then it kind of creates this perpetual cycle where it feeds the attention economy thing, where the few people who are putting that stuff out there on a massive scale for people to look at, they can collect information, and also those funny little quizzes are part of the attention economy as well. But on the positive side, and this is the thing with art being kind of universally connective, it connects people on a universal level. There is no kind of, I'm a better artist than you, because art's subjective, and obviously people resonate with different types of art. So the art part is what opens people up. And in actual fact, once you become open in the creative sense, on a conscious level, these things that we could view as negative, like this constant stuff we see as we're scrolling and you think, oh, that's garbage. Actually, none of it is garbage, because we can use all of those things once we're in a conscious state as a tool to create other things that actually inspire us to create the art and stuff. Kind of things that could be viewed as really unimportant in the grand scheme of things. And a lot of people are like, God, we shouldn't be wasting time watching this garbage. There's really important issues on the planet that need to be addressed. I'm thinking, well, actually, all these things are positive to me, because I use all of these things they inspire me to create things that then connect people and activate people to become conscious. So anyway, what I was going to say was, it's kind of a bit of a double-edged sword, that if we can use the technology and the media platforms to activate people through the art, which becomes having the empathy. When you look at artwork, or if you experience somebody's creation, whether it's music or, you know, a drawing or some kind of poetical prose, whatever, all these things, we become more aware of all these things, which isn't actually a negative thing at all, because we can then become conscious creators rather than what I would call passive, unconscious creators, because everybody's a creator. It's just that some are consciously aware of it and others are unconscious of it. And if you're unconscious, you tend to see yourself as a victim of circumstance, whereby everything that you decode as your reality outside of yourself, externally, is instrumental in terms of how you feel, what happens to you, your life experiences, you know?
I kind of want to go back to something you were saying about when you're like surfing the internet, whether it be on Facebook or whatever, you're consuming certain content and you're saying, oh, it could be rubbish or whatever, junk or not. So in Marshall McLuhan's idea about media and medium, like an extension of our body, our sense, and our mind, where we use our senses, the five senses, and it forms our mind, right? Of whatever we're seeing, hearing, touching, of all our experiences. And then we convert that, right, into our expression outwards. And so it's taking the outer mind, each of us, and expressing it out there. It's something about this, even at the root, and there's a lot of imagery has emerged from the psychic shadows. It's not controlling us any more than, like, let's say a dream does. But also we can't attempt to control it without suffering the consequences. The thing about the shadow, that Jungian principle, we have to embrace the seeming darkness and attempt to reckon with its message and messengers. If we stand a chance of learning, you know, more about ourselves and society and humanity and life on a collective level, that's why we keep on looping this thing. It's like a Joseph Campbell said, our dreams are our personal myths, and our myths are our collective dreams. So the media is our collective dreams as society. If you view it in this way, it's kind of telling us that we need to deal with these aspects of our own shadow individually and collectively if we are going to progress to this area that we all right here either directly involved with Infinite Imaginarium, who likes Infinite Imaginarium content. And it's that new story, right, of connecting with each other, of being the creator, of realizing this. Kevin, did you want to add something to that?
Well, if you think of the source of media in any town, if you were to look back 500 years ago, most people could not read, and people would feed information to an individual, and the town crier would literally walk through the streets and give updates about who would be getting married or what rules were put up from the ruling party, and the whole point being that one person iterated what was considered to be a substantiated, factual information for others to change behavior or prepare for changes. Prior to that, any new person who came to town from outside places would generally be quite the person of interest, because they would bring pieces of other parts of other lands under their own oration, and bring concepts to the psyche within the society. So you fast forward that to the modern day, and there was a really great monopoly in radio and television for a long time to coerce public opinion towards the national identity was supposed to be. We all believed what we were told because there was no reason to think otherwise, and every outside source was relatively heavily refuted, and what was considered credible disinformation was generated to support the control of public opinion. Now we're on minds, and now we're sort of in the middle of all the potential truths and untruths and opinion pieces, and people really working very hard to be damn smart to get the message out about what's being proven that is not being reported, because we're pretty aware through social media what our traditional media sources are acting more as a messenger for a specific intention within society, and it's not a healthy one. It's one that is making us quite reserved and extremely agitated and opinionated, and to ask us to label ourselves and others very personally, which is really kind of backwards way of being human, because we are a constant state of evolution. We're never static. We always are within some new sense of being, some new sense of understanding, whether it be biologically or spiritually or philosophically, through our consciousness as we grow together and learn more about our interconnectedness with the rest of the species and our living earth. This takes time to develop from youth, and this is why our media should support health. Currently, it's actually quite divisive and very difficult to live within. It doesn't bring much happiness to people. It generally brings them discomfort to some extent.
Kevin, can I actually agree with you 100%? Because what I actually was going to say was, this is Missy Nomer, and I'm going to tell you, I just turned 40. I had to stop watching media at 17 years old because I became overwhelmed with the narrative of mainstream. It did not make me feel comfortable. I did not agree with most of what was being said. I don't follow sports. It became really obvious at the time. I had been married for I was newly married to my partner that I was with for almost 10 years, but he said very wisely to me to try not to watch TV for about a week or two. I stopped all news, commercials, TV shows. I found there was low-level propaganda where you are obvious to things like commercials selling you things, but then there's the added level of behavior modification that Tori's talking about, where they use things like scare tactics and fear and reprogramming our energy and our vibrational frequency. So I had to keep myself in a certain light, what Joseph Campbell refers to as myth being like the power of myth, and actually traditionally stories having been passed down like culturally of important things that were sacred, and it was traditional for explaining identity to cultures. And in our music now we have removed harmony. They've removed the frequency, the tuning frequency of the instruments. So they've also put the voice through the auto tune. So you see that it went from media for me. Now media includes music. And before, as Satori knows, it was samples of instruments once they took away the instruments, and we could deal with that, right? But now, with the added putting the voice through this machine, you have no inflection of any natural peak or inflection of the voice. It's very concerning when it doesn't hit or resonate at a natural vibrational frequency within your body. It doesn't heal as well. And as far as media goes, the last thing that I would like to say about this is when I was told this, and I worked for so long as a nanny, when parents really wanted to allow their children to watch TV, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Anton LaVey, probably either the head of the Church of Satan or a Satanist, very high up there, Anton LaVey, I believe he was quoted as saying that the TV was the 20th century's greatest invention to further their agenda. They referred to it as the altar of Satan, and that is in, I believe, quotes. And they said there's no better invention for them, and that's where I'm just going to leave it. For me, there are no divides, and media is divides. It is created It's not like Satori and I would like media to be, you know, beautiful and healing to people and give them something back. But right now, media is destructive. In fact, he sent me a clip, and for everyone, everything is a remix, and that thing liberated me so much. And I just want to thank you, Satori, for that, because if we go based on the old media and the old narrative, we will never get past this place that we're in now.
Yeah, and that goes into, you know, media literacy, and it's being able to analyze, evaluate, access, and create media. And part of the thing that they do with the copyright laws, they make this mystique that there's certain media that you cannot manipulate, or you cannot use and remix, even though that it is built on past idea. Now with digital media, even though there's still these kind of like constraints on us on different things, or they want to have this perception of constraints on things, but we actually have the ability of a multimedia company sitting, you know, a lot of people with their smartphones, but I think it's easier too if you have like a desktop or a laptop to actually start producing media. And when you start producing media and you're looking at editing and how, what you were saying about music and sound and repeating a certain phrases, and, you know, before I even started doing media, a lot of things that I used to do, and this is before I even saw everything was a remix or even started really thinking in this way, it was just a natural instinct of mine of how to process information. I would just write down little notes, and then like later, and this is what everybody kind of does when you're a child, you kind of mimic, right? You mimic your parents, you mimic whatever sounds. So when I first thought about expressing myself, I would mimic certain people that influenced me, whether it was Hunter S. Thompson, Jack Kerouac, Robert Anton Wilson, whoever that I was really into at the time. I kept on repeating, and it resonated with me, and it was just like this impulse. But later, you learn, after you like start remixing it, you know, it's kind of like about great artists steal, and because you got to keep on doing that, so you integrate it into yourself, and then, you know, you learn the rules like a pro, so you could break them like an artist type of thing. So the more you use media literacy and your creativeness, you learn these things about the media at large, but also about yourself. And I think a lot of everything is seamless in my opinion. You know, I have this non-dualistic way of looking at things. But what the power is, and what I want us to do as the Infinite Imaginarium always, is use our media as a spark, to use our media to try to inspire, to try to and hopefully it sets somebody on that path of transformation and creation. But also to one of the other things that I used a lot was about connecting, then collaborating and creating. Because one thing about the copyright stuff is like, no one owns ideas. It's more like ideas own us. We are receivers or transistors of consciousness. We are nodes in the net of Indra. And the more we realize, the more that we find the magic in the in-between the others. This dance of sharing, of connecting and collaborating. For me, it's not only that people consume our media, and I don't even like that word, consume media, but it's that they help create the media. And that's that experience of that dance between ideas and expression. Just 2 days ago, Bathtub Jin wanted to recite this poem by E. Cummings. I have it up on my thing, but that experience of her giving me the audio and I fixing it, and it was funny because we had this conversation out, and I was editing while she was talking to me, and she was getting frustrated because she's like, "Oh, it doesn't sound good," or maybe the pace is too bad, and you know, she was over analyzing it. I was like, "Oh, don't worry, I'll edit it and make it go with." I got a song that I like. A lot of times when I do my own reciting of either my poetry or something else, I have a song that helps me, right? to keep on rhythm or whatever. It's just to help keep that tone or that pace or that mood that I'm looking for. So I was like, oh no, I could edit it in. And then so once I started giving her the parts that I was editing, she's like, oh no, I'm gonna read it again. And then we went back and forth, and then we came up with it happened within a couple of hours, and it's really neat. I want to give people that experience of not only, the end result is cool, but I think like the journey is a lot more interesting.
That was really awesome. When you were the first person I think to say create your own media, and I got behind that like right away. I was like, that's dope. I did start taking digital photos because I was doing Photoshop and I wanted to start manipulating my own images instead of using other people's media. And once I started doing that, it was impossible, I think, to stop. When you see your limitations of what you can create or where you want to go, where you're trying to go, or if you have a positive message at all, it's really interesting to see what you create, what comes out of your mind, what are you, when I turned off the media, and I laid there in the seat of darkness, so to speak, what is the spark that comes from there? Like you said, when you go to the darkness in the back of that cave, there's still a spark that comes from there. Creation comes from these places. If more people were to go to the dark places of their minds, turn off their TVs, and think for a moment, what would I like to see? They might actually find they could create amazing things.
And just what came to my mind right there, and I wasn't even thinking about this until you started talking, and it goes into something I mentioned before on the show, but the symbol, the bee shaman. So remember you even tagged me on one of the cave paintings. So prior to this, all the cave paintings were like news reports of things that actually happened. People saw on hunting, landscapes. Where my image comes from is in the deepest, darkest point of the cave. Probably the shaman went there, but that other creative spark out there for what is possible or what is not seen yet came to him in the darkness, and he drawed it. They even said that where they found this particular image was somewhere that was really actually dangerous to be at, especially if there was absolutely no light, and they were just kind of amazed that he was able even to do that feat, much less come up with this idea, going to that edge. And I think as we grow, each of us, as you were saying, you get kind of ignited, right? When I was younger, and I was listening to Pink Floyd, and then of course I always started off with us smoking, and I was like, "You never heard of Pink Floyd? I'm putting it on right now." And then like I remember one of my friends told me, he's like, "Oh man, I used to be all into Morrissey, and I thought Morrissey was the best band." Because it wasn't until I heard Pink Floyd, and it changed my whole world. It's like I didn't know. It made me feel like I didn't know anything. That spark sends you on this journey of like, I need to consume better media. For me personally, I didn't really get into reading until like the end of senior year. My friend gave me Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and I read that book, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't know reading could be this entertaining. And then I digged into Hunter S. Thompson, and what influenced him was Jack Kerouac. And then I read Jack Kerouac, actually the same friend that gave me that book gave me On the Road. And when I read On the Road, I was like, not only that reading is cool, I was like, writing as for expression, but also exploring your true being, exploring reality, exploring consciousness. And once got that spark, like I said, I use this term, that's where this term comes from, banging my head against reality. Every time I thought, and it's banging my head against mainstream reality. Every time I got to the point where, this phrase, you need to grow up or this and that, I always found it as I was banging my head against reality, because I knew the calling of the artist, or the calling of the true being, or of consciousness, or the other, or whatever you want to put the phrase on, was like, okay, come on. It's like, you're only fooling yourself. I mean, I have like these strong dreams that always speak to me. I learned not to to bang my. It took me a long time, but I learned the lesson the hard way. Like I learned a lot of my lessons. Is not to fight it, but it's kind of like that principle of surfing. You know, you kind of like ride the waves, and my deep dark secret is that Infinite Imaginarium can be a vehicle for anybody to have an environment and cultivate that ability to do that. And I think, you know, as this one phrase came to me actually from the Science of Non-Duality page, it says the Tao turned into one, and one turned into two, two turned into three, and three turned into 1,000. And I think that's how it's going to be. I don't know how like long it's going to be, but I think if we keep, because for me, you know, what I want to do is not only like try to help people get that experience, but also to, you know, as we do what we do, we try to encapsulate these moments, and we put our energy and focus, our attention in them, and we cultivate them, and we always, and this is what we do, we sculpt them with our digital tools, and then we convert that into the physical stuff that we want to do later that we talk about, you know, whether it's the Infinite Imaginarium bus or the actual Infinite Imaginariums. The hard part is we got to have that long vision, but we also have to be in the moment and constantly, like I said, in one of the things is, in a lot of ways it's not gonna be better than this, you know, about grinding away at reality.
Yeah, I was just going to add something, and it got me thinking what you were saying, and what Missy was saying about people. You know, if people just turn their TVs off and looked at themselves a little bit more, then they would start to unleash their own inner creativity. But the thing is, many people, you know, go to work and they come home and they often say, "Oh, I just need to switch off," which is such an irony, because what people usually do is switch on to switch off. You know, they come in, switch the TV on in order to switch off, if that makes sense. Really strange. And because, you know, using television as an example again, puts the brain into that very passive, hypnotic, suggestible state, they do technically switch off from themselves. So by switching on the TV, they switch off. You know, what I think the Infinite Imaginarium is going to be sort of instrumental in doing is allowing people to switch on to these things, but at the same time they can explore themselves as well in a safe environment, because a lot of people, they have some awareness of themselves, but it scares them. They're still scared of who they are. They don't want to look too closely at who they are. You know, when you're lying in bed and you're thinking about things, and then some of these thoughts turn to worry, and, you know, the kind of the what ifs. So these little thoughts are going through people's heads, and the whole thing about television and everything about society that offers some kind of a distraction. So people go out to work, you know, they work a sort of a 9-to-5 day. That's a form of distraction. Then they talk to their friends, which usually, in many ways for people, which is like a release, is to moan about something. Oh, you know, such and such happened at work today. People quite enjoy speaking about things in the negative rather than in the positive. And nowadays it'll be on Facebook, people put their status up, or then they'll have a bit of news, you know, something that is positive. But all these things are a distraction from the self, about thinking about who they are as a person, or going more within themselves. Because when certain people touch upon that, you know, if you speak to people and they've sort of gone partly into that realm, they usually immediately want to distract themselves with something, because some people aren't quite ready to fully explore dark recesses of their own mind or their own consciousness. Because obviously that is the path to becoming, you know, that's the enlightenment path that people often, the new age will show memes as being this beautiful thing, which ultimately it is, but initially it can be quite terrifying. I know that being an artist, some of the things that I've created, I've had to go to some really dark places to create those things, to go to places that aren't necessarily pleasant places to go, transmute and transform that darkness into something positive, giving people a safe environment where they can explore, getting to know the self. It's, you know, it's quite a lonely practice, but the infinite imaginarium, or being connected with other people, feeling as though you can share the things that you struggle with, or share the things that you find easy to get through that process. And then it suddenly doesn't become so scary anymore. You know, like a young child that's starting a journey that is new, they may be scared when they're at home with their parents talking about they're about to embark on something new, like joining a new class or school, and it's like, oh my God, that's not what I did before, and they're scared. And then as soon as they get to the classroom and there's other children there that are the same age as them doing the same thing, it suddenly doesn't become so scary anymore, and they don't feel like they're just this one person having to deal with this experience on their own.
The dark night of the soul, as Joseph Campbell would say.
I was very much remembering the story of the bee in the back of the cave, and the Jungian concept of the core goal of, you know, becoming aware of one's unconscious, integrating parts of yourself while maintaining control. But the process of individuation has to be achieved through partially interpreting one's dreams, studying myth, or making your own art, for example. But as you just said, which is what I was going to, yes, indeed, you have to go to the darkest places. Some of the darkest things come out, but without doing that, we can't get to the other parts. And I believe the Jungian theory of, you know, the shadow being the seed of creativity, is the dark side of being, is where we find our spark.
And I guess too, maybe even posing the darkness that we see, or the lack of authenticity or depth, or what we consider to be art, the lack of that in our media, that shadow coming out. One, it's a disease, right? You know, that concept of Wetiko, that this media making us kind of passive or shutting off, is one disease of not allowing us to view ourselves, but also in the disease there's the cure, because it gets so dark sometimes, or maybe so quiet that you can't help but awake, search for something better. There's this intuitive knowledge that this is not what it all is about. There has to be something more.
I just did a couple of days where I got to stay with my brother, and he's such an amazing young man. He is doing the work, and he hasn't had a television in his house for I don't know, 6-8 months, and when he did have it before, it wasn't anything he really gravitated to. So our conversation sort of focused on the fact that when you disconnect yourself that way, generates the challenges of keeping flowing communication with all the other folks that, you know, he reaches out to me on a completely different level, because we can have our Imaginarium style discussions together, and he doesn't have very many outlets for that. So there is sort of a stigma to self-discovery in the fact that we feel already like an outsider. Social media seems to give us this invisible boundary to be a little bit more audacious and not have it hit home and that type of thing, but at the same time, you know, maybe just absorbing more triviality than substance. So I'm an avid learner when it comes to media, in the fact that I need to know what's happening in the world. So I study foreign policy and global economics. I watch RT television that's on a lot in my home, passively in the background. Keep me updated on economics and you know, some editorialization from non-second sources, and I use Twitter for a lot of what American politics and business and sources are saying and how they're representing stories. So we don't have much balance. We have a lot of polarity. That constant, not solutions thinking, but only pointing out what's wrong thinking in media is the warfare on our mind. For every moment that you're spent being distracted by what new thing you should be worried about, is another moment you stop thinking about what was really wrong, how to fix it. You know, what's the solution to come together and just acknowledge each other. We're really deeply far away from just the basic fundamental of the compassionate acknowledgement of just respecting people for their day-to-day actions. We consider them cogs or automatons performing their function to get them the few dollars that they have. And it's no wonder after they've been just sort of looked at as a lesser person, if you depending on what task you do, to want to come home and gain some sense of power through social media or identifying echo chamber media explanations. So I think a lot of that has to do with how a media is impacting us on that sense. And I would say that the main thing that media should and could be doing for us is making us want to communicate and want to learn to create and tap into our childlike innocence to know more about other things than 200 channels worth of options that you have. And the youth have come quite a long way in completely disconnecting, and that's why we have this break between the 35, 40 year and up group and the 40 year and less group, and they have no reason to watch anything more than probably a few television programs that share colloquialisms with each other. So I have high hopes that the Imaginarium, we can spur curiosity in a new and beautiful way, have people be creators of media and not consumers of media.
Things I'll say, I'm not completely one of the types of people to completely shut out what's going on in the world, because I can pick it up in a really almost like close your eyes and feel it in the universe kind of way. But you know how some people say, I don't follow sports, I just watch the highlights. I'm like that about people and about following what's going on in the world. So I wanted to say that, yes, I like you also like to know what is going on. So I haven't completely stopped following. Like, I mean, when I say stop following mainstream media, I won't watch TV. But I, of course, like you, I think most truth seekers do, and people that want to find out, you know, for themselves, they seek out information. I just try to follow the highlights. And I also, like Satori, I think got to the point where we tend to want to make a lot of our own visuals around us and inspiration, keep it around us. So I think maybe that's what propelled me to like keep ahead of the game a little. Like I was always like, no, I want to work on my photos instead.
Well, I'd just add one tiny thing to that really quick. And the reason why it's important to me is if you don't know your capacity to your level of compassion for the struggle of the human condition wanes terribly when you completely remove the media aspect of general events, is going back to the terminology of the town crier, where you found out who passed so that you could make preparations to help with the funeral, or you found out who was getting married so you could make preparations to help celebrate their new life together. Not knowing, ignoring media in a complete sense is counterproductive just as much as being too immersed in it, because your ability to feel and to be sensitive towards what humanity's struggle is showing us really suffers. And that is also another big part of what we're struggling through right now, is we're very polarized. We're either over consumers or we're completely backed out of the space because we can't handle the pain of it anymore. Well, somehow in knowing ourselves, raising our bodhisattva, our thousand eyes to see the suffering and the thousand hands to reach out to the world to cure it. We have to find that equilibrium within us to be healthful in our spirit and in our mind and in our daily lives.
Of the media as our collective shadow. You know, personally, if you don't deal with some of your subconscious, I like to reframe things. You know, we always talk about revolution, but revolution is about going around in a circle. I don't want revolution, I want evolution. Of just framing it differently triggers and primes certain things within that message, hopefully. And it's something that I'm always playing with in my own head, but also too, I create this loop of trying to express it in whatever I'm doing, like on the social media content. And it's this interplay dealing with my own shadow or dark night of the soul and trying to hopefully present it in a way that touch other people. And I think that exchange is really powerful. Something that Terence Mckenna said, and it's kind of wrapping up exactly what we all kind of said in different ways. And then from there, I'm going to go with Misty Nomer, then Cartman, and then end with Kevin. Terence McKenna once said, "We have to create culture. Don't watch TV, don't read magazines, don't listen to NPR. Create your own roadshow. The nexus of space and time where you are now is the most immediate sector of your universe. And if you're worried about Michael Jackson or Bill Clinton or someone else, you're disempowered. You're giving it away to icons. Icons are the mainstay of electronic media so that you will want to dress like X or have lips like Y. This is shit brain. This kind of thinking. This is all culture division. What is real is you and your friends and your associates and your highs and your orgasms and your hopes and your plans and your fears." And we're told, no, we're unimportant. Get a degree, get a job, get this or get that. And then you're a player. But you don't even want to play in the game. You want to reclaim your mind and get out of the hands of the cultural engineers who want to turn you into a half-baked moron consuming all the trash that's being manufactured out of the bones of a dying world.
The death of the old narrative is a real thing, and creating what we want around us is important, I think, now more than ever. If you notice, there's a lot of advertising right now and movies and shows with the word rise up, rise against, revolt. If you've noticed this, I've noticed this, and like you brought up, when I make my art, I ask myself, is this for evolution or revolution? I don't need people to revolt. I need them to wake up.
Be the change you want to see in the world. First, we have to imagine the change we want to see. So I would change that slightly and say, imagine the change you want to see, and then you can be the change. We have to be, as Kevin was saying, compassionate about the human condition. That in itself is collaborative, connective. If we're not empathetic to the human condition, then we are perpetuating the cycle of division. Yeah, I think that's really all I wanted to say on that, in closing. So yeah, connectivity is obviously the way forward, I think.
Be a creator. If your juices aren't flowing, give that to someone else. Be a creator. Nurture their spirit to create. Take time from your time to make timeless time for others. Be a creator. There's a mystery we must solve. Strange marks on the rafters, the wind seemingly the cause of the noises. From the endless empty floors above our heads, dark shadows cloak all manner of truths. Perhaps it was the gods again, unfounded rumors of deep space. Even we must be willing to consider words long and properly shed by the mind. Putting all the pieces together. When we can't possibly find all those pieces, when doubt resonates with first concepts as a clear note and spring challenges the songbirds and the puzzle only deepens, we look to the sleeping skies, stars, pretenders, in the strangest arcanum, the snare of belief obscuring unexamined leads. What is that constitutes evidence? What weapon brings back the dead? We light a candle, drink elixirs while chanting impossible spells, yet nothing new is revealed. We can turn over all the stones, open every door and every memory, but the answers do not come. What we seek eludes description. The chambers have been empty far too long. Only the proper question releases the sword. Only a royal hand can split the rock. If we were told those long eons ago about the righteous path, how folly follows from each wrong understanding, Roshi said beginner's mind might allow us truths to flow forth. But how once more begin, so long after the first glint of light beckons us to follow? We have a deep mystery to solve, and nothing more.
The artist's task is to save the soul of mankind. Anything less is diddling while America burns. Because if the artists who are self-selecting for being able to journey to the other, to the shadow, into the darkness, holding on to the internal flame, to the shadow, into the darkness, holding on to the internal flame. If the artist can't find the way, then the way can't be found.